Thank you, dear guests, for your patience. Now we would like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Ranier Kellerhals, the head of, industry lead of media and cable at Europe, Middle East, and Africa in Microsoft. Please welcome him.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. So also warm welcome from my side, and I would like to talk to you about cloud and cognitive computing and their impact on the future of news production. But as we just talked about digital transformation, I would like to reflect a little bit upon what are the driving factors of that digital transformation and how is that going to impact the media industry, just some general remarks. At Microsoft, we look at digital transformation as a process that's impacting many industries. And actually, the media industry is probably the most impacted industry because it transforms the value chain, it transforms the way that content is distributed, produced, and consumed, and it also transforms the business models in the media industry. So if you look a little bit more closely, content is and will be king, as they say in the media industry. So being relevant for your audience, covering the breaking news will still be very important in the future. But it will change the way that content is being distributed, and it's key to make that content available in the format and on the devices and in the various situations and contexts that are relevant for your users. Secondly, technology is going to have a significant impact, and this is where Microsoft plays. Microsoft, being the largest software company in the world, we have made our own transformation from being a software provider to increasingly being a provider of cloud-based services and a cloud platform that are being used by our customers. And with regards to the media industry, that technology is going to change the way we're capturing content, we are producing it, we're distributing it, and how it is being consumed. And the cloud has a couple of impacts. First of all, it brings down the cost of many of those processes, so you don't have to make significant investments into infrastructure. You can use cloud services, and it also shortens the time to market, so you can create new media offerings, new content offerings in much shorter timeframes. And thirdly, data is going to change the way media is going to be presented to consumers, because with the back channel that we have with IP-based media, we can understand what consumers are actually watching, what they are reading, and we can take that information in order to create more relevant content for those audiences. We can take that information in order to offer targeted advertising opportunities, and we can provide recommendations what might also be interesting for our audience, for the individual users. So data, we believe, will drive the transformation from traditional mass media to what we refer to as personal media. Now, as we heard in Paul Lee's presentation, television and radio are here to stay. They are not going to go away. That's also our belief at Microsoft. But we think they will be impacted and by the new forms of content consumption and those new possibilities, and they will be complemented by those new distribution channels that we are seeing. So this is just some general remarks, and as a technology provider, we're working with organizations like Al Jazeera to help them on their journey to leverage those technologies for their business and for the benefit of their audiences and their employees. Now with that, let's talk about how that is going to specifically impact the news business. And I guess we all know the news workflow at a high level. It of course starts with news gathering, so understanding what's going on out there in the world. Then the production processes of capturing the video content and editing it so that it's distributable. Also the editorial processes of planning new stories, assigning resources to produce those stories, and then write up the articles and format the content in an appropriate way. And then the distribution of the content through television, through radio, through print, through online media, onto different platforms, be it television sets, radios, or all kinds of mobile devices. And something that is increasingly important, the user engagement. We can use that back channel to actually understand not only what people are watching and looking at, but also what they think. We can get their feedback, we can get their responses, we can even have them participate in the content that we are creating, providing a new level of user engagement. And on the left-hand side, of course, there's the various data sources. There's actually a an explosion of data sources that journalists need to look at today. And then it really starts all with a story proposal being made. This is something that we would like to produce, with resources being assigned and technical equipment and as well as human staff being assigned, footage being produced, and then content being edited and formatted for the different outputs that you see on the right-hand side. So that's, as we look at news, the high-level workflow. Now, how does the cloud and how do cognitive computing technologies impact that workflow, and how can they be leveraged along that workflow? So we've tried to do a little mapping here, and rather than going deep on the technology, I just would like to show you a couple of examples for the applications, the new applications that are leveraging that technology. And it starts on the left-hand side with solutions for news monitoring, for watching what's going on out there in the world, solutions for streaming live content from external audiences and participants, and with tools for mobile journalism. And then, as we move further to the right, you can see different tools and technologies being applied along, you could say, the news value chain. And these are all tools that are helping the modern journalist to get their job done more effectively, to break the news more quickly, and to make the content available across the various channels and to engage the audience. And the underpinning of that is what we refer to as a digital platform. And a digital platform, almost by definition today, would be in part cloud-based and in part on-premise, would typically be a hybrid deployment. And it would consist of a solution to manage your media assets, to better understand the content that you have, automatically indexing it, that would be media analytics, to understand what your audience is doing, what they are watching, what they're interested in, that would be audience insights, and of course, distributing the content to the various devices. So that's kind of the big picture of how cloud and cognitive computing can support the journalist and how the journalist would use digital platforms in order to get the job done. Now, as you can probably tell, the blue is for cloud applications and the orange is for cognitive computing applications. So this is where we are using technologies like big data, like machine learning, like cognitive services in order to understand the data and understand the content. Now, let's go from here and look at some of those applications in a little bit more detail. So news monitoring. This is a solution built by one of our partners, XNews, and this is a little bit like TweetDeck. So we have multiple channels here. On the left-hand side, you can see the news agencies. This is what journalists have always been using, Associated Press, Agence France Presse, the German press agency, to understand, you know, what kind of news they're gathering. But today, in order to stay ahead of the competition, you also need to look at social media, at the tweets, at the posts of people who are maybe on site, who are closer to the event, and who are a trusted source. So this is where differentiation begins. Everybody can subscribe to the news agencies, but it's your sources, your informants, your correspondents on site that provide that additional insight that you can have here as another channel. And then on the right-hand side, you can also watch what the competition is doing. That would be the RSS feeds, maybe what other news stations are covering. So you basically have one pane of glass to look at to understand what's going on out there in the world. So that is a news monitoring application, and as much of this content is actually born in the cloud, as it's originally published on the web, it's just logical to have that deployed in the cloud. And that's a kind of solution that is used, for instance, by the BBC in the BBC News Monitoring Department, and by Sky News, specifically Sky Sports, to also watch what's going on out there. So that's one example of how the cloud can help journalists understand, you know, what's happening in the world. The second application I would like to introduce to you is audio and video over IP live streaming. And this is essentially using the Skype platform. Skype is very popular. Many of us have probably been using this in both our private lives and our public lives. As you are probably aware, Skype is a Microsoft product now. We have about 300 million users around the globe who are using the internet to connect and to not only chat, but also have a voice conversation and to do video streaming. And that same technology can be used to connect pretty much anyone. you know, anyone from the audience or your subject matter expert into your studio and have that live signal being transmitted to your television or to your radio station. And together with partners, we are offering end-to-end solutions for that. The example that you see here in the background, where you can maybe see those many different small videos playing, that's actually a game show produced by TF1 in France, who have basically created that whole show around the concept of participatory engagement. So the audience is invited to call into the show, into the game show via Skype and contribute. And it's basically a big quiz show. So, but actually with basically a cast of millions, so to speak. So lots of benefits here from, on the one hand side, saving cost, to, on the other hand side, of engaging your audience and, you know, creating a more engaging experience. And that's also being used by many of the large news networks in the world, including the BBC, CNN, and also, just to give an example from India, by News Daily TV from India. And then mobile journalism. I've been to a mobile journalism conference in Dublin last year, where they spoke about using smartphones and tablets to do news coverage. So that has made lives of journalists quite a bit easier and gave a lot of more new possibilities to journalists, that they can now use their phone not only to post their messages back to the newsroom, but also to capture photos, to capture audio recordings, and even do video shoots in pretty good quality and upload them to the newsroom office. So this is where, of course, smartphones and smartphone solutions are very important. So now that we've gathered that content, let's look at what are we doing in the newsroom. And in the newsroom itself, one of the key applications of the cloud is what we refer to as editorial collaboration. And this is something that we've been doing with a couple of large news organizations who understand that, and this was mentioned in Al Jazeera's presentation this morning, that it's very much about collaboration, about enabling people across different sites, across different teams, across even different organizations to collaborate on a news story. And this is why these portal-based applications, these collaboration applications, become increasingly important for news organizations. For instance, at Gannett, we have deployed Office 365, our collaboration platform, and that helps them with what they call the story bubble. This is basically when the first rumors, the first news are coming in, and when you are starting to assess as a journalist, is this going to become a story? Is this to be trusted? Is this relevant for my audience? So this is a phase where a lot of communication and collaboration happens, and that then leads to the story proposal. And this is where the solution that is deployed at, for instance, the BBC, and in a similar way at ZDF starts. These solutions start at the story proposal. Once the story proposal is being made, these solutions are used to share that story proposal so that everyone else in the editorial team can see what they are working on, and then resources get assigned, content gets produced, and that content gets uploaded to the different media asset management systems, which are then visible through that portal. And one of the unique things about the BBC journalism portal, and the BBC have actually published a white paper about that. It's actually based on one of our technologies, SharePoint. It provides you with what they call a topic page. This is what you can see here in the middle, in the lower row. And that aggregates all the content that the BBC have about one topic, like, you know, the US election, like, you know, any environmental disaster, any topic that you might think of is aggregated in a smart way and visible in a single page. And this not only includes the BBC's own content, but also content from news agencies, content from other news providers, so that as a journalist you can actually very effectively find out what do we have on that topic. And then finally, Deutschlandradio, which is a radio station in Germany covering German expatriates all around the world with a German language radio service, and they also do other languages as well. They have taken this to the next level by also including rundown editing into that portal. So their journalists don't even need to switch to another application to put together the rundown, but they can do this straight inside a web browser, and that, of course, in their case, connects to a computer-aided radio system in the background. So this is some of the tools that actually that don't really replace existing solutions, but they create a unified user interface for journalists to work on it and to collaborate effectively in the newsroom. So with that, let's look at data journalism. Data journalism is increasingly popular as many things, many trends are actually represented in data, but data is not really a story. If you would want to present a table to your television audience, that would be a pretty boring idea. But you can bring data to life with graphics and with animations and with infographics. And this is what data journalism is about. It's about understanding the story inside the data and then bringing that story to life through visualization. And it's one of the big trends in journalism these days, and CNN have been using that during the US elections, of course. We've also seen that at Sky News. Many of the large news organizations are using that today. And Microsoft's contribution to that is a solution which we call Power BI. And this is what it looks like. So basically, you can think of the journalist connecting to the various data sources, and Power BI takes away a lot of the technical complexities of doing that, and then basically interacting with the data in a visual way and eventually publishing that to the web so that users can consume it on their tablets, on their smartphones, and the way the data is represented automatically adapts to the device. So that way you can very easily, very effectively tell your data story in a compelling way. So that's Power BI, and that's something that is increasingly being used by journalists to tell data stories. And this is, an example from the K5 News program from NBC, who are also using that. So the next example I wanted to share with you is the capabilities around search. So journalists, in addition to collaborating and coming up with good ideas for new stories, in addition to of course, sometimes telling data stories, also need to do quite a bit of research. So search is probably, apart from maybe email and smartphone, one of the key applications for journalists. So what can we do to make search better? And again, some of the cognitive technologies can help us here. So the journalist on the left-hand side will probably work on a number of documents on different types of content, but he or she will also collaborate with other people, with subject matter experts out there, with other journalists, and with eyewitnesses. So, many people who typically are involved in a story. So it's not only about content, but it's also about people. And last but not least, the connection between the journalists and these people are typically conversations that may happen over the phone, that may happen over email, or over social media, or via any instant messaging service. Now, what if we could actually understand those connections, and this is where cognitive computing comes into play, and understand what is relevant for a certain story, which of those connections, which of those communications, which of those pieces of content, and actually create a network around the journalist that creates basically a semantic network of related content, people, and conversations. And that not only spans an individual story and an individual person, but that could eventually span the semantic network of all the people that a news organization are working with, all the content and all their communications. And this is what's the power of Office Graph. That's basically the technology that powers Delph, which is actually a semantic search technology which is visually represented here. And that's now part of Office 365, part of the collaboration platform that we are providing, that is actually adopted by many news organizations, and that is actually one of the key reasons why, in addition to the collaboration aspects that we spoke about earlier. So we've now talked about how these modern technologies can help inside the newsroom in the early stages of creating the content. Now, once the content is produced, obviously, I need to put it into my newsroom system in order to put down the rundown. As we just saw, in some cases that might be exposed through a portal. In some cases, it's a more classic newsroom system. Again, that will not go away. That will continue to be required. Actually, some newsroom vendors have expanded their systems to also include some of those collaborative aspects. So in some cases, there might be some overlaps. In some cases, the newsroom systems are integrated in those portal applications for an easier work environment for the journalist. And then at some point, we need to do video editing, right? And this is where we as Microsoft are clearly a platform provider and where we are partnering with the leading players in this industry to really make it happen, to bring those editing capabilities and collaboration capabilities around content to the cloud. And on April 22nd, just 2 days prior to the NAB show in Las Vegas, Avid made a big announcement about them now moving their product portfolio to the cloud. So Avid, probably one of the biggest names in this industry, have started their journey to the cloud. They have already consolidated the broad product portfolio that they have into a platform that they call Media Central. So that's basically a common hub that they are providing. And that is, of course, deeply integrated with their concept of Avid Everywhere, so that you can access their applications from pretty much anywhere. So they have already started that journey, and now with a partnership with Microsoft, they're going to make many of their applications available in the cloud on the Microsoft Azure platform. We are proud that Avid have selected us. I think there's many good reasons for that, and I would just like to mention 2 of them. One is both Microsoft and Avid understand that the future of the media industry is not cloud only, but it's going to be about hybrid deployments, about combinations of on-premise components, where customers have already invested, and cloud-based services. And we want to work with Avid to bring those 2 worlds together. That's one of the key common denominators. And secondly, we're also strategically very aligned. For Avid, the media industry is super important. That's Avid's top industry. And also for Microsoft, media is a priority industry. So we are very much aware of the specific requirements of this industry, and we are making significant investments in that industry. So having a person like myself who is trying to understand what are the challenges in the media industry, working with our account teams on the one hand side, but also with our partners and our engineering groups to cater to the needs of the media industry, that reflects that commitment from Microsoft to the media industry. And that's actually, that's probably going to take that commitment to another level. Actually, a little bit earlier, last year in November, we announced a partnership with Adobe, another big player in the editing space, who have started their journey to the cloud a little while back, actually, but now have also announced that they will be making their products available on Azure, specifically the Adobe Creative Cloud, so that basically, you have 2 of the largest providers of editing and post-production solutions now committed to the Azure cloud, which is a reflection of why Microsoft is, probably pretty well positioned in the media industry, and that's a reflection of that these vendors understand that Azure offers some advantages for them. So that takes us to the last part of the value chain, to the distribution side. And let me give you 2 or 3 examples here. As we already talked about, obviously the content needs to be distributed to multiple channels. Now, historically, many news organizations, when online media became popular, they set up a separate editorial team to produce the online content, and they had a playout infrastructure completely separate from their television playout infrastructure to serve the online channels. Now, obviously, this no longer really makes sense because it's very costly to have 2 parallel infrastructures, and also it means that you have to do a lot of the work twice. In order to avoid that, you would want to have an integrated production environment where you can produce for television, radio, and online in parallel, and you would ideally want to have a playout solution that serves those different channels all from an integrated environment. And we've been working with one of the biggest players in that part of the value chain, Imagine Communications. About 50%, or actually I think it's a bit more than 50%, of all video that is broadcasted worldwide touches one of the products of Imagine Communications. So this is how big they are on the playout side of the industry. And they have partnered with us to make their playout and ad insertion solutions available in the cloud. And what you can see here is how they are supporting an end-to-end workflow from encoding the video content to encrypting it, to making it available in different formats, live, video on demand, and then eventually distributing it to pretty much any device, whether it's a TV set or a smartphone or a desktop or a tablet, and inserting the advertising for monetization. So Imagine are also leveraging the capabilities of the Azure cloud in order to make that happen on the distribution side. So I think, as you can also already see from those examples, the cloud and cloud-based computing and broadcasting is not really something of the future. It's already here now, and it's starting to grow in many areas in the value chain. And with that, let me get to one of the maybe more exciting parts, where the cloud can kind of open up new possibilities, and that is what is referred to as mixed or virtual reality. And if we have audio, we can maybe switch on the audio. This is a video that we produced together with the NFL, the National Football League in the United States, to envision what the future sports experience could look like if we combine traditional television with mixed reality. As you can see here, you can put up this device, which is the Microsoft HoloLens, to expand the screen and actually have a larger display area. You can insert 3D holograms into your field of vision in order to have a more interactive experience with the content. And as you will see in this scene, you can insert statistics in order to get more information about individual players. You can, think about some other scenarios, some social scenarios. In this case, you have actually one of the players visiting you in your living room, and to have a gamification aspect where you can actually replay some of the scenes with one of with a game that happens basically on your table in front of you. And you can do a closer analysis of the athlete's performance if you're really into that. So as you can see from that example, kind of the sky's the limit here in terms of the imagination. And our sense is that mixed reality will have a big impact in specific content formats. It will be powerful in education, of course. You can easily imagine this applied to educational purposes. It will be big in animation. So we're working with some of the big animation content producers there, and it will probably also be very big in sports and in news, we believe. So something to watch for, creating new ways of engagement. Another way of engaging your audience is to invite them to vote, invite them to ask questions, invite them to participate in a quiz, invite them to a survey. And this is what we're enabling with a solution which is cloud-based called Microsoft Pulse, being used by many of the large news networks. And what this essentially does, basically, it allows you to do online voting, online responses to questions, online surveys, which can then be presented on television. This is a way of making the audience part of the experience and really connecting with them and really, creating more of a bidirectional communication rather than just presenting to your audience. This is increasingly popular, and Microsoft Pulse, makes that dramatically easier to set up. So as you're aware, this is not totally new. What's new about this is how easy it is to do that now. Basically, it takes some 15 or 30 minutes to set this up, and then you're good to go and use your Pulse in your newscast. So with that, let me show you one last example for how you can leverage that back channel, and this is what we refer to as social engagement. So Microsoft has developed a solution called Microsoft Social Engagement to listen to what's going on out there in the social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on all the other platforms, to understand, what do they think about my brand? What do they think about Al Jazeera? What do they think about my news stories? What are the comments they are making? Do they like my anchor person? Do they like that reporter? And what's the hot topics that they are discussing? And this is kind of a dashboard that can be used by journalists and by social media experts to understand, as you can see here in the upper left-hand side, the overall sentiment, where the action is really happening. Then you can see the sources, and you can see, and that's probably most important, who are the top influencers, who are the people actually who are shaping the public opinion in social media on your brand, on your news coverage. And if there is a key influencer and you want to respond to him or her because he or she has maybe misrepresented you, then you can respond to that and directly engage. This is why it's not only listening, but it's also about responding. It's also about engaging. And then you can, of course, also see which languages these posts are posted in. That gives you a sense for, what are the geographies, what are the languages that I'm reaching. And on the other right-hand side, you can see some of the keywords that are used in the posts. And this is the engagement view. So once I click on one of those influencers, this comes up. I can see his or her posts, and I can, as you can see here in the left corner, I can directly respond to one of those posts to make sure that what's being discussed in social media, that we as a news broadcaster also have a voice in that. So this is all the tools that are available to journalists today to engage on different levels with their audiences. Now let's take a quick look at the underlying platform. And I would like to start with media management, because with so much content being produced, with so many distribution channels to be served, we need to have a smart media management platform to make the most out of that content. And I think we have a good example here from a company called UFA. UFA is Germany's largest TV and film production company, parented into Bertelsmann, a large media conglomerate in Germany. And they have actually moved their entire archive of about 120,000 hours of video and film content to the cloud. And they are now using the cloud to automatically index that content, to create transcripts out of the spoken word, to recognize the faces in the content, and to do much more. And then the next step is for them to make that content publicly accessible in a video-on-demand platform to monetize it. So let's watch the reel to learn more about that. So I will have to talk to it because we don't seem to have audio here. So this is the company, UFA. And the first presenter here, Ernst Feiler, their Director of Technology, explains that UFA's vision is to move from being just a content producer to become basically a content provider. Today, they are producing the television content, capturing it with cameras, and then they're licensing it to broadcasters for distribution. But so far, they don't have a direct way of making their content accessible to consumers. And this is what they want to change. They want to make their content accessible to consumers all around the globe, because they have retained the right to distribute their content in other geographies and in other languages other than the geography and the language it was originally licensed for. And then this video elaborates on that a little bit further and explains how they are going about that. Because we're a little bit limited time-wise, let me go back and move to the summary of this. There is some other key aspects. One I would definitely want to mention, and that is the media analytics capabilities. This is what I just mentioned. Using cognitive services, again, we call them Azure Media Analytics, in order to convert speech to text, and we can actually do that for a number of different languages already. Detect faces and also emotions, and if necessary, do face reduction. That means removing or blurring faces that are not supposed to be seen in the video. We can also recognize the text that is on the screen, like for instance, who is the person who's presenting, what's his or her title, etc. And then we can also do video summarization, which is basically automatically generating a little video trailer that summarizes the content that's in the video. And this is again very powerful in making more out of the content that you have that might be undocumented today and that might be very costly to index manually. So with that, let me go back to the overview and move to the conclusion. So if you've looked at these different capabilities and technologies, and if you want to look under the hood, so to speak, what's under the hood? What are the technologies that are enabling that? Sorry, that was not the right one. Let me. Okay. I need to fast forward a little bit here. So I would like to show you, kind of an under the hood view of what's there. So we saw all this. So I think we're close to the end here. Okay. Yeah, that's the distribution platform that I mentioned. And this is basically the technologies that some of which I mentioned that are powering this. So as you can see, to summarize, the cloud will be an enabler for news production and for journalists to collaborate more effectively. It will enable mobile work styles. It will also help journalists reach their audiences across platforms and channels. It will enable them to connect with their contributors in more effective ways. And cognitive computing will make it easier for journalists to find content, to reuse it effectively, to enrich the source content, and finally, it will also help them to understand their audiences. That's the audience analytics piece. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Hopefully it was a little bit interesting for you. I'm looking forward to having a panel discussion about the challenges and opportunities in cloud. Thank you very much.